If you go back to Blackpool in 1980, the Labour Party conference in full swing, Clive Jenkins, union leader, declares that Britain's EEC membership is bruising British industry to death. Peter Shaw thunders that it constitutes a rape of the British people. And 71% of Labour delegates vote to leave. In short, Brexit, though unnamed, was Labour Party policy then. Fast forward 4 decades and the EU referendum was won not in Belgravia but in Boston, not in Camden but in Clacton. The electorate didn't demand frictionless trade or Erasmus exchanges, they wanted a different country. And the tragedy is that neither the Conservative nor Labour parties have had the courage to build it. And then there's Lord Glasman, political theorist, peer, sometime prophet of Blue Labour, and his intellectual protégé, Dr. Richard Johnson. Glasman co-founded Blue Labour as a response to the party's drift away from work, from family, from faith, from place, and his project was and is to reclaim Labour's soul, not by embracing globalised liberalism, but by turning to the party's pre-war heritage, guild socialism, Toryite moral economy, and democratic patriotism. And Johnson, lecturer at Queen Mary Hospital, University, and sometime advisor to Starmer's Circle, offers the most coherent case for Labour Lexit, his central thesis that Brexit was not a mistake to be managed, but an opportunity to be seized, to reclaim statecraft, restore sovereignty, relocalise economic life. And the public didn't vote leave for deregulated cheese or longer queues in Sofia. They voted to take back control, not just of borders, but of budgets, ports, steelworks and shipyards. And crucially, they expected the state to act. Keir Starmer, of course, voted Remain. He then spent 3 years making Brexit sound like a misdiagnosis, from which only surgical re-entry to the single market might recover us. Now, as Prime Minister, he embraces Brexit in name only, not as a political economic revolution, but as an unfortunate fact to be quietly administered. The policy consequence is clear. Labour has not used the powers restored by Brexit, no strategic state aid, no domestic procurement revolution, no fishing revival, no left-wing trade strategy, just Rachel Reeves' fiscal rectitude and a nervous tilt towards EU regulatory alignment. The irony is, of course, is that Boris Johnson, the arch showman, grasped the revolutionary mood better than Starmer. His levelling up pitch may have been cynical, but it resonated, and Blue Labourites argue that if Johnson, the Etonian, could flirt with left economic nationalism, why can't Labour embrace it in earnest? So, what does Blue Labour actually want? It wants reinvestment in old industries using state aid. It wants tariffs on goods that undermine British manufacturing, national control over immigration, agriculture and fishing, re-embedding of economic life in local institutions, unions, cooperatives, town halls, a rejection of hyper-liberal cosmopolitanism in favour of community, tradition and moral economy. Their mood is melancholic, certainly. Glasman invokes Tawney and Lansbury, and Johnson speaks of trade as a tool for development, not consumerism. Even figures like Jonathan Hinder now call for steel nationalisation and tariff protections reminiscent of Barbara Castle, but herein lies the contradiction. While Blue Labour offers a plausible post-Brexit vision, it's anchored in social conservatism that repels much of Labour's metropolitan base. And its opposition to social liberalism, whether on gender, race or Europe, risks alienating the very coalitions Labour needs to win. From my point of view, it's got the wrong bit of Labour, and it's emphasising the wrong direction. Is there room for any Brexit anymore? Starmer's Labour has made no meaningful use of the powers Brexit restored. Worse, it still acts as if sovereignty is an inconvenience, not a responsibility. But voices like Johnson remind us that a different path is possible, a patriotic, protectionist, democratic socialism, to which, frankly, I would demur with a sort of ugh. But aim not at managing decline, but at rebuilding national confidence through economic revival, at which I would say, yes, great. But the two things, the aim and the method which Blue Labour puts forward don't align, they don't work. In the same way as the Starmer position doesn't work. The Starmer deceit doesn't work, and the Blue Labour solution doesn't work. But the Blue Labour articulated ambition, I think, might work in some strange way. Starmer, Reeves and modern Labour elite may find the language of Blue Labour embarrassing, but ignore it at their peril. The voters of Grimsby and Doncaster didn't shift to reform because they want to return to Brussels. They did it because they're tired of being ignored. Now, Labour once believed in Brexit. It voted for it in 1980. It won with it in 2017, and it could govern with it now, not by mimicking Farage, but by reanimating its own forgotten tradition, one where Parliament governs, the state acts, and working people are not asked to trade their dignity for cheap toasters and the ghost of liberal orthodoxy. If Glasman is right, and I think his diagnosis might be right, but his solution is wrong, Labour's future lies in reclaiming its inheritance. If Johnson is right, Brexit was a left-wing opportunity lost. And if Starmer isn't careful, reform will seize the mantle Labour's abandoned and do so with devastating effect. The problem, therefore, isn't so much to get on board with Glasman and the other Johnson, but to recognise the difference between the aim and the method. And to do that also, possibly, for reform. This also was the problem offered by Theresa May, that she diagnosed a problem and then offered us only one solution. If you reject that solution, you reject the issue as well. That isn't realistic. And we've spent too long playing around with words. It's as if we're all locked into some sort of discussion of the ontological argument. And the ontological argument, attractive though it may be as an academic discussion, is actually about wordplay. And we've had slightly too much wordplay with the last government and with this government. We need to get rid of the Glasmans and the Johnsons in all their manifestations, I fear. And we need to find and elect people who are straight talkers, who can say what they mean without playing around with words to the point where you want to scream. Words will only take you so far until they come up against reality. And the reality is, there's two realities. One, we have a Brexit that doesn't work. And two, there are a variety of solutions to that problem. Now, not all the solutions are going to be the solutions that are manageable. We may agree that Brexit doesn't work. There are a few people who think that Brexit is wonderful, but the majority of us recognise that Brexit has been a disaster. Having got to that point, we have to look at what are the solutions, because Europe isn't going to let us back into the club that quickly. Maybe a year or two ago, maybe they would have said yes. Not now. Not now. And certainly not after our ridiculous trade deals with Australia, with America, and so on. What do we actually get out of those deals? Very little, precious little, except to be able to stand up in Parliament saying, we've done a trade deal. We've done nothing. We've achieved nothing. Nothing. What can you actually say about these deals? Well, even claiming that we've halved net migration. What have we actually done? Nothing. Why? Because the only way to deal with migration is to sort out the fundamental issues. Number one, our birth rate is going down, so we need to raise it. So a cap on the number of children we can have is simply shooting ourselves in the foot. We need as many children as possible if we're going to raise the number of people who are going to be paying tax in, let's say, 20 years' time to support the increased number of pensioners who are going to have to be kept by the state. It's simple mathematics, and the time to act is now. And then we need to decide what our relationship with Europe is going to be. All of these questions need to be asked. I don't think another ideology promoted by Glasman and Johnson is what's needed at the moment. But there we are. This is what I understand to be the Johnson, Glasman, blue Labour theory. I think it's ridiculous, but let's give it some credit for being there, and to ignore it would be foolishness, because it is here and it's going to play a significant part, I think, in the debate in the next few years.